Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and educator Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue features a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It's the week of February 18th. This is Season 4, Episode 4. It is the first Sunday of Lent, but Ann, Ash Wednesday seems like it was 2 weeks ago for me. There's so much to talk about as we dive into Lent, but before we light the flame and talk about what's hot this week, I wanted to share with you that we took up your recommendation and we watched The Greatest Night in Pop. And Ann, I am really glad we did, so thank you for sharing that. Welcome to this episode. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Yes. So much of what you said resonates with me, Haley, and maybe that's a good tie-in, because one of the ideas from The Greatest Night in Pop Music has kind of underscored something I'm thinking about this Lent. So for our listeners, that was the cover image on our last podcast. So that was 2 weeks ago. And I'm excited to hear what your takeaway was. But for me, I'll just say this quickly, and feel free to go with it where you want, Haley. But I do want to know your takeaway. Okay. Bruce Springsteen, a huge fan, obviously, all my life. And I've seen him, I watch him very intentionally anytime I hear the boss speak, because my frame of reference is so extended. And he had a seminal part in he's coming off the Born in the USA tour. It's like he is incredibly popular, and he has a big part in the song. To be honest, it's a very rock voice, but it's not Michael Jackson's voice is angelic, or some of these voices are remarkable. And Springsteen has his own voice, but he has a big part, right? And I understand why. But today, when he's talking about these musicians, he always does this. Springsteen always builds other people up. He's talking about Steve Perry. Oh, his vocal range is incredible. Cyndi Lauper, the difference she made by singing the way she does. He builds others up. And I think of how often in my school, in society, we tear people down. We don't compliment them. And again, I've noticed this about him. He freely compliments and builds up the strengths of other people. And I have so much admiration for that. It costs nothing to build somebody else up. And I shared that with my students, and I thought maybe this is something we can all work on this Lent. And they got it. So that was a huge takeaway for me, because it's real from him. And that's the other thing. Maybe he's secure enough in himself that he's able to do that. But, so it was a good conversation. What gets us in the way from building other people up, and why are we not doing it? So
Right. No, I love that. And I will admit that was not my takeaway. So I appreciate that you point that out to me. I just found it fascinating, and you and I are, the same age. I think of our generation, it's such an iconic song. And
True.
I don't think any of us had any idea what it took to create the song. It is
Right.
fascinating to watch. It is actually amazing that they had, I think it's 46 of the artists, or, over 40, almost 50 artists who were there. You look at someone like Bruce Springsteen, and you're right, this is January of 85, so he's just coming off of his tour. Literally, he flew in just at the end of his tour for this. But I think what I found the most fascinating was how much real footage they had. And, it was fascinating to see, unfortunately, some of these artists who are no longer with us. The other thing that I found really interesting was, of course, especially with the solos, they're recording these individually. And then you hear them in the song, and when I heard them individually, they sounded really different. But then you hear the song, and it's like, oh, right, that is what it was. I'm thinking in particular of Bob Dylan. And,
Yeah.
He was actually, that I found that was quite an interesting part of the show for me, was his role in it.
Agreed.
But anyway, I highly recommend it. I love what you said about Bruce Springsteen. I will take that to heart, especially when we get to our melting pot, the takeaway, because I think that could tie into some of what I'm hoping to do this Lent as well. So thank you for sharing that. Certainly Greatest Night in Pop is worth watching. There's a lot going on this Lent. When I think about one of the things I did this past week, or at least since we last met, was take part in the senior alumni at Notre Dame's Lenten Journey video. So let me take back and explain that. There's a senior alumni group at Notre Dame, of which I am not officially a member, but
Okay.
I was asked to participate in this.
Yeah.
But it's geared towards senior alumni, but it's of course will be offered to anyone in the Alumni Association, as all things are. But a woman reached out to me and said that every year they do a little senior alumni video as a Lenten journey, and it's oftentimes just been with one person. But the woman who was in charge of it this year decided that it would be really neat. Her name is Shelley, and I had met her when I was walking the ND Trail,
Mm.
and she thought that journey pilgrimage in conjunction with our Kilimanjaro hike, which is, again, some of the same group that I had hiked and
Mm.
walked with, to really bring some of us together to talk about both of those journeys. And I, of course, said yes, as I often do. It's really hard for me to say no. And we talked about what other pilgrims, core pilgrims who had walked the 320 miles of the ND Trail had also hiked Kilimanjaro. So there was a group of four of us who got together on a Zoom with Shelley and the Alumni Association, filming and recording it, talking about our experience and, the physical experience, the spiritual part of it, the community aspect of the ND Trail, and then Kilimanjaro. And I will say it was way more an emotional experience than I thought it would be. I think I filmed the entire Zoom, and it will be shown. So it's a video people will be able to watch with just tears welled in my eyes the entire time. There were many tears shed talking through our experience. It really brought me back to a time that was very meaningful to me. I joined both of these groups, both the ND Trail group and the Kilimanjaro trip, because I thought it would be something that was fun to do. And it kind of came at a time in my life when I was looking for something like that. And of course, like any experience, when we go on any sort of pilgrimage or adventure, you get so much more out of it than you realize you did. And so all of this will be shared in the video, but it's always a privilege to be asked to be included in something like that. And, again, they thank us for giving and sharing our story. And yet, as we all do when we give, I got so much out of it in return. So stay tuned. They're supposed to post a trailer soon, and the video should come out end of February.
Well, the immature side of me is like, oh, I want to see you with these tears on your, like, I am really touched by the reality, like that's how the space that you were in as you were recalling this journey, that it was that heartfelt. And something like that speaks for itself. So somebody asked me recently if our podcast is both video and audio, and I was like, no, we're just audio. But there's a certain vulnerability that you all had there, by having it be a video piece, I think.
Oh, there is, and you'll
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
And I do a very good job, and I don't know if this is right or wrong. It's just kind of who I am. I can compartmentalize a lot of things, and so it's very easy for me to talk and to share. And maybe that's because it's I do it so often, and I need to.
Yes.
But there are moments where, and maybe it's certain topics or certain events, that I can't. It's too emotional, and certainly those journeys that I went on fit into that category. But I think it'll be a really powerful piece. We loved it. It was four friends on a Zoom talking about two really meaningful experiences, with some crazy things that happened. So that'll all be shared as well. And stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, Greg Boyle, the author of Tattoos on the Heart, says good stories come to those who can tell them. So yes, this pilgrimage, this journey, and some of the events, in God's own way, knew that there would be a time and a space for you to kind of share that. It doesn't rest with you or just your immediate family and friends. I think that's wonderful that this platform allows you to do that. And I was curious when you were talking, you said like I was at a place in my life where I was looking for something like this, like you're searching and you found something. And I feel that way about Lent. I do think I don't know if you feel this way, Haley, but there's so many resources out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, I think you and I'll speak for myself. I feel this way like about certain things in my life, like Notre Dame. There's so many resources, and it's like, yes, because they know I'm connected to the university. And it's like you have to be intentional about what you kind of pay attention to. And I feel that way about Lent, but it goes back to that point. I think people really are searching. This is a season, it's a very specific time where we know we are called to repent or to change something, to practice a certain discipline, to live in a new way. But we're searching, but what is it we're going to find? And there's this marketplace of different resources, which is a great problem to have. Please don't take it the wrong way. But at times it's like, oh, there's this, praise you go, hallow. Notre Dame has something you mentioned about, maybe we'll talk about the art, that they're offering, the daily reflection on
Right.
that. It's like, there's, there's no one, if you want something for Lent, and if you are intentional about the search, you will find something that I think works for you. I
Yeah,
hope.
no, that's very true. And I think about it in the sense of, as we talk about communications at the school where I work, and, are we over communicating? Are we communicating in a way that works for the families? And ultimately, what it comes down to is let's over communicate on different platforms, and people will receive it in the way that makes sense to them. And so I would imagine that's part of what this Lenten journey is for many people, right? There's so many different avenues, whether it's an app, whether it's a website, whether you get it on your phone, that people or book or a journal. There are a number of resources. I think what you are saying, and I think what I find to be true too, is I'm like, oh, there's this journal I could do. Oh, there's this app I could do. Oh, I want to do everything, and I can't.
Yeah. No.
But I do think the multiple options are great because you're going to reach more people. But we also don't want to, we can't do it all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I do have to be pretty intentional and make sure I commit to something. I think that's my hardest
Yeah.
part
That's true.
is if I'm going to
Right.
commit to a journal reading every day or, Faith ND every day, I need to really commit to it. And that's hard when you're committing to 12 of them.
Right. Yeah. Do what you can do it well, right? Do what you're doing, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
So,
and it was a busy week. You're right. As you pointed out, and I'm seeing this. We started with the Super Bowl, Super Sick Monday. I hadn't heard that. Is that a common term, or is that just a
well, it might be
post
more of
Mardi
that,
Gras
especially.
tour? Is that everybody calls in sick on Monday?
So they said 16.1 million Americans calling sick on the Monday. That's the projected number. People who study this. It was in the Morning Brew. I don't know if you are familiar with that. It's another resource for your news
Right.
outlet, but I have real like I saw someone wearing an NFL sweatshirt today, and there's so much I love about the NFL, but like any institution, I have real problems with it. I have problems with 17 games in the regular season this year. I think that's too much. I'm not a fan of Thursday, but we're not talking about football, even though we love to talk about it. I don't want the season to go another week. Right.
Right.
There's 2 weeks between the NFC and AFC championships and the Super Bowl. So it just makes this intense, like it's so intense in the buildup. But there is an argument. I could see why you could move it even a week later because if it's President's Day weekend, just having that Monday off or move President's Day up, if you will. I mean, because you are people, a third of our country is watching the event. We're at parties. And so like they said, so many people don't work the next day. Either they've been partying or like here in San Francisco, it was I mean, it was a close game. It was a good game in that sense, but people were hurting. We loved this team. It was, a bummer. So you're just like
It was a
going through
bummer.
the motions. Not that I needed to stay home. I would never have stayed home for that. But yeah, Super Sick Monday, Fat Tuesday, Ash Wednesday, Valentine's Day was Ash Wednesday. Those were a conflict of interest as well. I don't know how your
Right.
school handled that, but yeah, so it was a busy time.
Yeah, and a big birthday.
Yes, yes, yeah. To our listeners, yeah, a milestone.
A
Which
milestone.
someone who shares the milestone, yes, I do think, I think it's good to recognize milestones, and people do. I think they really do, and it means a lot. And I think that's a good part of just living a life is recognizing for people the milestones, whether it's, your age, an anniversary, a job anniversary, whatever it is. There's something there. So,
Well, certainly lots to
yeah,
celebrate and contemplate as we move into Lent. Um,
indeed.
so the gospel reading for me this week, just moving into our spiritual stew, today's gospel just jumped out at me in particular. Things kind of grab us at different times. It mentioned, the gospel talks about Jesus going into the desert where he was among wild beasts. And that just jumped out at me because and reminded me of our trip to Africa. And that's still kind of on my heart in many different ways. But yeah, if you were out in the desert, that you would be among wild beasts. And I don't think I've ever heard that gospel reading and actually thought about I think beasts in my mind has had kind of a fictitious connotation to it. I always thought of
Mm,
like mythical beasts or
sure. Yeah.
wild beasts being kind of Harry Potter-esque beasts. But no, I mean, when you are in the desert, you are among wild beasts. And anyway, that's a very simple, reflection on today's gospel. But it was just interesting and kind of made me smile when I heard that. Again, reflecting on our trip to Africa, but it also made me realize, that is a lot of what the gospel is, and the reflection in the homily afterwards is that personal reflection and experience, and we all can only understand and hear things through the lens of what we know. So that was kind of a quick reflection there too. But I do want to share another resource, something that is not anything I would normally be interested in at all. I am not a big art person. I'm not someone I appreciate going to an art museum. I have gone to many in different cities, parts of the world, and I have loved that experience. I do better when someone explains things to me. But it wouldn't necessarily be my first choice of a place to go and visit when I go to a new city. But this year, the Alumni Association is doing Lenten perspectives based on art that is at the Racklin Murphy Museum, which is the new art museum on campus. It is stunning. It is beautiful. And it's interesting because my swim coach, Tim Welsh, his wife, is an artist. And she worked at the SNITE, the old art museum on Notre Dame's campus, for a number of years. She's taught classes. She is a beautiful painter. And so I sent the link to her because I thought she would appreciate and enjoy, just experiencing this during Lent and getting to know, the different pieces of art that are in the museum. And she wrote back and thanked me. She's, at a place in her life where it'd be good to connect, with religion, with art. But she said something that was really interesting. She said, I'm so happy they're doing this. It's always surprised me how disconnected the art, so much of it is Catholic art, is from kind of the spiritual side of campus. It's always been the museum and the art, but they were always trying to find ways to connect with the spiritual side of the university, and there was she always felt there was a disconnect, and so it does make so much sense to have this spiritual piece shown through art, because that is what all of art was for hundreds of years. So it's interesting. If art is your thing, and again, it's not really mine, but I have enjoyed it. It's little video clips about different pieces of art that are in the museum.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. And I think it is another great resource, but a different resource because as someone who teaches theology, there was, I don't know if it was like a professional development day. They said every theology teacher should be including some form of art in every class period. And there was a quote, it's like, art teaches theology better than like theology does or something, like, because there's so many expressions, right, towards how do we design, create image God. So I do try I inherited this Christology class from some colleagues, and there's a ton of art. We actually begin the class with images of Jesus, and we deconstruct the Western image of Jesus, like looking at him through so many cultural lenses. So, what a powerful reminder. Yes, religious art really is. An interesting idea. Like we can't divorce that from the campus community. How is it integrated? In what ways do we see it?
Right.
So, yeah, praying with it is a great exercise. So that's a great, and there's some powerful images on temptation in art, to be honest.
There are. Well, and for those of us who are visual people,
Yeah, yeah,
it's a great
yep,
visual connection to our faith
yeah,
as well.
yeah. But kind of just your testimony on your experience of being in Africa and then hearing the gospel. I mean, that is exactly why we return to these readings, because the gospel doesn't change, but our
Mhm.
own lives do. So for you to picture that and like reminisce on those experiences just must really put that all in a deeper, richer context. So
Yeah.
I think that's powerful. But yeah, just building from that same reading, hearing it this morning. It was very short, as we know, and Mark's gospel leads. Yeah, thumbs up from Haley. Mark's gospel is the shortest because I teach Matthew's gospel, and it has a lot of the details of, Jesus is tempted, and he's, brought turning the stone, the stones into bread, and the temptation of like, right, the for hunger or for power with I'll give you all the kingdoms. He's brought up to the hillside, and just the different types of temptation. So there's like three that we reflect on from that reading. And I find my students enjoy kind of thinking about the different ways that we're tempted. So is it the ego?
Mm.
Is it the material self, for like hedonism, like sins of the flesh, or, is it that I'm greater than God? But at the conclusion of the homily, the pastor said, the English translation of Our Father says, leads us not into temptation. He's like, but it's just more accurate in Spanish. No nos deje caer en la tentación. Don't let us fall into temptation.
Mm.
And he said, because God will lift us up. But I was thinking about both. Like, for a lot of us, especially for teenagers or anybody, like, we know there are places where we might go and just really be tempted. And for some of us, that's like, don't go there. It's better if you don't literally go to the place where you would be tempted. That's how we have to manage it. So I think it's okay to pray for that. Give me the strength to just stay away from that situation. And for some of us who we find ourselves in the midst of temptation, we fall. Like that is another good prayer. Don't let me fall into this, Lord. Like, right. So I'm a very both and person, but I don't know. I think I'll put that out there with students this week. I wouldn't have thought about the differences because I don't speak both languages, but
Right.
yeah, I thought it was an interesting idea because and he named different ways. What are the temptations we all face? And, it's easy to be like, oh, well, that one's not, I don't struggle with that. I'm good on that, but it's like, well, every human being is dealing with temptation in some way.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day. So lead us not and don't let me fall.
Amen.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a good takeaway for the week. One of the things I used to be really good and intentional about what I was going to quote unquote give up for Lent. I shouldn't say really good. I used to be very intentional about what I was going to give up for Lent. And it was always something usually food related. And so I'm still going to work on that, I think. I
Yeah.
usually try to cut out desserts, sugar. But that's not, I think, the point of Lent. It does if you're going to pray over it and as you crave sugar, offer it up. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying not to eat desserts. So I'm going to work on that. But the other thing I realized last week, and again, all of our acceptance letters at the school where I work went out on Thursday. So it was a mad rush of a week in terms of putting together the admissions packets, the acceptance offers, the letters, making sure that the right letter is going in the right envelope and that I'm sending it to the right the whole thing, right? It's very tedious, but it's and very intentional in the way we do it. So I was like most people, but in particular for this week, for me, very busy. And something happened at work, and I can't even really remember what it was or who it was, but I just remember thinking, oh, I should go tell so and so about that. And then I thought, oh yeah, but I don't have time for that. And that was a real moment for me on Ash Wednesday, thinking, you know what? I need to not do that. I don't need to share a story about somebody else with a work colleague. I don't need to waste that work colleague's time by going into their office and sitting down and taking 5 minutes from my time. And so it kind of, none of it's malicious. None of it is, I really don't like the word gossipy, but it's a little bit of like gossiping about what's going on at the workplace or anything like that. So that was a big revelation, kind of an aha moment for me that came to me because I just really didn't have time to, or knew I shouldn't choose to spend my time that way. And then I thought, you know what, I should never choose to spend my time that way. That is not a good use of time. So that is one of my goals this Lent is to, I'm going to say, use my time more intentionally, but also I really loved what you shared about Bruce Springsteen, and I am going to take that even a step further and lift people up. So not waste time needlessly in ways that are not productive and can be harmful, but also choosing to very intentionally then use that time to lift people up. Never thought I would have an Ash Wednesday Lenten resolution based on Bruce Springsteen, but I'm going to go with it.
Well, yeah, it is a good one. And it came to my mind because I'm taking students to Jerusalem Farms this summer. It's on our immersion program. And it was a long day. We had a trip discovery night, and a student who I don't know came in my room and he started complaining about the one of the leaders. He's so slow. He speaks so slowly. Oh my God, it dragged on. Now, part of it is actually true. It was a long night. I understand his feelings. But I thought to myself, I don't know you and you don't know me. And my first impression is that we're disrespecting one of my colleagues. And I was just like really upset. And I just thought, but this is something I do too. So I'm not throwing stones, but I thought this is exactly what I have a place now to name it. And I don't need this young person to build up this teacher, but I want to take away, unless we're going to say something like we're as a community, because we're traveling somewhere, our work is going to be hard. We're going to be tired and hot. The temptation is going to be to tear down something, and we will be better if we can build each other up. So we'll see how it goes. So in your own small way, you like, that choice, like it's like those little things over time are what drag us down, and we get in those habits. So
it's the habits. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. Now, Haley, I am giving up sweets as well. A part of it is because I like the spirit, and I call it spiritual warfare, which is a very strong term. But when I see something sweet like that, it is a battle for me. Internally, I'm like, oh, I mean, and I lose the battle sometimes. Like I break the Lenten resolution. Like there will be days where I'm like, screw it, I'm going to have the square of chocolate. But it's this awareness. And one of the things that came up was like, okay, well, how do we know when we have followed our Lenten resolution, when we're deciding with those? Sometimes it's like maybe a little more gray. With the food, it's very black and white.
True.
Do you know what I'm saying? So yes. I think that's part of the draw, if we can name it that way. So, I will tear people down. I won't build them up, but I can also see when I eat the chocolate, it's like, oh man, I mean, I have my rationalizations. I'll be like, no, it's my birthday, or it's Sunday, or this person wanted me to have this. Yeah. So.
Well, it's also when you think about when you get to Easter or Easter weekend, or whenever you choose to decide that 40 days of Lent is over. For us, it's always just been Easter Sunday. But what am I going to do? Start calling people and talking about them? No, I'm going to die. I'm going to eat dessert. So.
Oh, now I'm in the clear.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, Well, good luck with that. Those are noble practices.
Oh, I'll keep you posted.
I know I grew up in a
Check in.
house where my father doesn't think you should tell other people what you do, and I get that. For some people it may be private, and I want to be sensitive to that. But I just think it's so helpful to hear and to know what other people are doing and kind of what's going on in their world. Like, for example, my hairdresser, I'm not even joking, sent me an Ash Wednesday image, and I was like surprised, and I just thought, and I said, I hope you have a meaningful Lent. And he wrote back and he said, I'm giving up being so consumed with myself. I want to say hi to people more. I want to be less disarming. I want to be more open. And I thought, this is so interesting. This is a grown man who has self-awareness about how he wants to be. And I was really glad he shared it. Like, I hadn't thought about that. That's great. And if I can pray for him and, maybe I don't need the specifics in our prayer for him, but just to know what he's kind of taking on this journey, I think that's a gift. So
I do too. And but going back to Ash Wednesday, it's my favorite gospel of the year. I think of it actually all year, where they talk about don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. And I do believe in that. I do think that there are times and acts of good work and service and the way we live our life that we don't need to share about in a bragging, self-promoting way. However, right. I do think there are times that we can share things about ourselves in a way that inspires other people, or even holds ourselves accountable, right? Me telling you that I am not going to eat dessert or I'm going to help work to build people up and talk less. I put that out in the universe so that people can help hold me accountable as well. It goes back to your and but
both and
both and that's better. Both and
yes. So always to what is it? Always to there's some quote. Any way to heaven is on the way to heaven or something. Yeah.
Anyway, we get there. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, well, I wish you well on the next couple of weeks of your Lenten journey. I look forward to connecting with you and hearing some of the ways that you've chosen daily to be intentional about your journey. I will make sure that I share the Alumni Association video when that goes live. But I look forward to hearing how your journey's going, and I look forward to talking to you in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And I look forward to just maybe praying with Art. The other part of my Lenten prayer practice is just more time in prayer. So, that resource for reflecting with Art is a great way to do that. And we'll see what other options pop up among the many resources that we have available.
The many. Well, no excuses, I think, could be the theme for this year's Lent, because there's certainly plenty of ways to pray.
It's kind of hardcore. I like it.
All right. Well, thanks, Anne, and thanks everyone for listening, and we look forward to connecting again soon.
Have a good 2 weeks.